Lyra Kane stepped off the shuttle and into the bright humming halls of the Interstellar Combat Academy. The walls seemed alive, glowing with faint pulses of light, and holographic displays floated in the air, showing cadets from countless worlds practicing combat, strategy, and advanced simulations. Humans had been late arrivals in the Galactic Federation, and the Academy was a place where species measured skill, strength, and intelligence. For Lyra, it was both exciting and terrifying. She adjusted the straps of her training uniform nervously. It was sleek, form-fitting, designed to handle gravity changes, rapid movement, and minor impacts. She looked around at the other cadets, and a chill ran down her spine. Towering figures with shimmering skin, multiple arms, and eyes that glowed like stars walked past her. Some hovered above the ground effortlessly, while others flexed limbs that seemed capable of bending steel. In comparison, Lyra felt small, ordinary, human. As she entered the main training hall, a group of alien cadets noticed her. One, a tall being with silver scales, smirked and pointed.
"Look at the human girl,"
it said, voice like gravel.
"She's gonna break before breakfast." Another, a blue-skinned cadet with 3 arms, laughed.
"Why even bother? She won't last a day in the arena." Lyra's cheeks warmed. But she didn't respond. She knew reacting would only make them bolder. Instead, she kept her head down and moved toward the registration desk. The clerk, a small green alien with soft tentacles, scanned her ID chip and gave a polite nod. "Welcome to the Academy, Cadet Kane. Your orientation starts in 10 minutes. Lyra took a deep breath. 10 minutes wasn't much time to prepare mentally, but she had learned to rely on observation. Humans had survived long on Earth, not by strength, but by noticing patterns, predicting behaviors, and thinking quickly. Maybe that could work here too. The orientation hall was massive, with hundreds of cadets gathered in groups. The instructors were an impressive sight. Tall, dignified aliens whose presence seemed to command attention even without words. One of them, a stern figure with crystalline eyes, stepped forward and spoke in a calm, resonant voice.
"Welcome to the Interstellar Combat Academy.
Today begins your first combat simulation. This exercise is designed to test reflexes, decision-making, and adaptability. Success will not be measured by strength alone." Lyra listened carefully. She knew humans were underestimated here. In a place where physical power and strange alien abilities dominated, her kind was often dismissed. That dismissal could be her advantage. While others relied on abilities they were proud of, she would rely on strategy. The cadets were assigned their first exercise, a free-for-all simulation in a virtual combat arena. Holographic platforms, walls, and obstacles filled the space, allowing for movement in all directions. Each cadet had to tag others to score points, and the last one standing, or the one with the highest score at the end, would win. As the cadets prepared, Lyra quietly studied the others. A cadet with glowing eyes was practicing telekinetic throws. A multi-limbed cadet was stretching and flexing each arm independently. Another cadet hovered, testing their flight balance. All of them seemed confident, almost arrogant. None of them had even looked at Lyra with curiosity. She was just the human girl in their eyes. When the signal sounded, chaos erupted. Cadets launched in every direction, using abilities that defied gravity and logic. Some created energy shields, others teleported in flashes of color, while a few leaped with superhuman speed. Lyra's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She moved slowly at first, keeping to the edges, watching patterns and noting how each cadet reacted to attacks and obstacles. 3 cadets, the tallest and most confident of the group, soon noticed her. They circled her, laughter vibrating through the arena.
"Come on, human," the silver-scaled one taunted. "Show us what you got."
Lyra didn't respond verbally. Instead, she focused on their movements, noting the gaps in their coordination. The multi-armed cadet often left one limb unguarded while striking with another. The hovering cadet relied heavily on speed, but struggled to change direction quickly. The third cadet, muscular and towering, underestimated the size and reach of smaller opponents. The first strike came from the multi-armed cadet. A fast swipe aimed to tag her out immediately. Lyra stepped aside with a simple pivot, letting the energy swipe pass harmlessly by. The other two lunged, thinking her movement predictable, but humans were trained in unpredictability. She shifted her weight, sidestepped the hovering cadet, and grabbed a floating platform to launch herself over the third cadet, landing behind him. A cheer, or maybe a gasp, rippled through the arena. The instructors observed with interest. Lyra wasn't using brute force. She was using observation, timing, and agility. Her every movement was calculated to counter the next move she anticipated, and she adapted continuously. The multi-armed cadet attacked again, this time swinging wildly. Lyra ducked under one arm, tripped another with a simple foot sweep, and redirected a soft energy strike harmlessly toward a wall. The towering cadet tried to grab her in midair, but she twisted and landed on a raised platform, putting a barrier between them. The hovering cadet misjudged the distance and crashed lightly into a holographic wall. Lyra felt her confidence grow. She wasn't strong in the conventional sense, and she didn't have telekinesis or flight. But she had patience, focus, and quick thinking. Every cadet who underestimated her now realized she wasn't just surviving, she was controlling the flow of the exercise. Time seemed to stretch as she maneuvered through the arena, always staying one step ahead. She used the environment creatively, bouncing off walls, ducking behind holographic pillars, and exploiting the slight delays in her opponent's attacks. With each successful move, her score increased, and the laughter from the aliens slowly faded into disbelief. Finally, she faced the three cadets together. They had cornered her, expecting an easy end.
"This is it, human," the hovering cadet sneered. "We'll make you wish you never arrived."
Lyra took a deep breath, centering herself. She remembered the instructor's words. Success is not measured by strength alone. She looked at the patterns of their attacks, the rhythm of their movements, and the subtle tells that gave away their next moves. She moved with precision. The multi-armed cadet lunged first, and she sidestepped, redirecting him toward a holographic barrier. The towering cadet tried to grab her, but she used a pivot and leverage to evade, causing him to stumble slightly. The hovering cadet attempted a quick strike from above, but she ducked at the right moment, letting him overshoot and crash softly into a floating platform. In less than a minute, the three cadets were tagged out one by one, unable to land a single successful move on her. The arena fell silent. Even the other cadets paused, stunned at the display. Lyra stood in the center, breathing steadily, her heart racing but controlled. She had done what no one expected. She had survived, outmaneuvered, and outsmarted the top cadets of her class. The instructors exchanged glances. One, the alien with crystalline eyes, nodded, slightly impressed. "Humans," he murmured, almost to himself. "They always see what others overlook." The three defeated cadets, still recovering from the shock, stared at her with a mixture of anger and respect. They had laughed at the human girl in training class, confident in their superiority, and she had proven them wrong without using brute strength or alien powers. Lyra didn't boast or celebrate. She simply adjusted her uniform, keeping calm as if this had all been routine. Inside, though, she felt a spark of pride and excitement. This was only the beginning. The Academy would challenge her in ways she couldn't imagine, but she now knew something crucial. Humans could survive, adapt, and even excel in a world built for the extraordinary. As the simulation ended and the cadets filed out, whispers followed her everywhere. Some called her clever, others called her lucky, but no one could deny that she had made an impression. Even those who had mocked her at first now watched with cautious respect. Lyra walked down the corridor, her mind already planning her next steps. She had come to the Academy to prove herself, to show that humans were not weak, and she had succeeded in her first test. The path ahead would be long, filled with challenges, rivalries, and unexpected dangers, but she felt ready, She had something that many of the aliens underestimated: human ingenuity, patience, and courage. For the first time, she smiled. The galaxy was big, the aliens were strong, but she was human. And humans, she knew, never gave up. The day after her astonishing performance in the first training exercise, Lyra Kane walked through the academy corridors feeling a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. The whispers about her had spread like wildfire. Some cadets gave her respectful nods. Others barely concealed their envy or disbelief. Even instructors looked at her differently now, some with curiosity, some with quiet admiration. Lyra knew that the first exercise was only a small taste of what the academy had to offer. She had survived because she observed, anticipated, and adapted. But here, intelligence and strategy were tested alongside raw strength and alien abilities, and in the coming weeks, she would discover that not every challenge could be solved by quick thinking alone. She reached the practice hall for her next session, where cadets were assigned advanced combat training. This time they would work in pairs and teams, learning to combine abilities and cover weaknesses. Lyra was paired with another human, a boy named Jace, who had a calm demeanor and quick reflexes, though he lacked the instinctive adaptability she possessed. Their team consisted of cadets from different species: a floating alien with luminescent wings, a small quadruped with extraordinary speed, and a four-armed cadet capable of manipulating multiple objects at once. Lyra studied them silently. Each had unique strengths, but she quickly noticed weaknesses too. The floating cadet relied too heavily on aerial movements and struggled with ground obstacles. The quadruped was extremely fast but predictable in patterns. The four-armed cadet had remarkable multitasking skills, but became flustered under pressure. The instructor's voice echoed across the hall. "Today, you will learn teamwork, adaptation, and strategy under dynamic conditions. Individual skill is not enough. Only those who can combine intellect, observation, and cooperation will succeed." Lyra listened intently. This was new. She was used to relying on herself, but here, the challenge was learning to lead and support others. She glanced at her teammates and formulated a simple plan. She would not try to overpower anyone, nor would she attempt flashy maneuvers. Instead, she would coordinate, observe, and guide the team, using her human ingenuity to compensate for the differences in ability. The exercise began. The simulation projected a complex environment, shifting platforms, moving obstacles, and holographic adversaries. Teams were to capture data cores scattered across the arena while defending their own. The other teams were aggressive, relying on speed, strength, and alien abilities to dominate. Lyra's team moved carefully. She assigned the quadruped cadet to reconnaissance, using its speed to scout ahead. The floating cadet was tasked with overhead support, providing alerts from above. Jace and she covered the mid-level platforms, ready to intercept opponents or guide teammates. The four-armed cadet would manipulate environmental obstacles to block rivals and create advantages. The first wave of opposition attacked. A team of 3 towering aliens with energy shields tried to dominate one platform. Lyra analyzed their movements. They were strong but predictable, relying on brute force to push others off balance. She whispered instructions to her team, timing their actions to exploit small openings. The quadruped scout darted around, drawing the opponent's attention. The floating cadet swooped down briefly, causing a distraction, while Lyra and Jace maneuvered behind the opposing team, tapping a control panel to alter the platform's position. The four-armed cadet pushed a holographic barrier into place, momentarily blocking the rival's path. In minutes, the energy shields had been bypassed, and her team captured the first data core. The other cadets watched in astonishment. Lyra wasn't physically overpowering anyone, but she was orchestrating her team with precision. Her mind worked like a chessboard, always thinking several steps ahead, predicting how every cadet and obstacle would behave. The next challenge was tougher, a rival team of 3 advanced alien cadets attempted to ambush them mid-arena. One used telekinetic force to hurl obstacles, another relied on blinding flashes of light, and the third moved faster than most cadets could track. The other cadets panicked, unsure how to counter such a combination. Lyra remained calm. She directed the quadruped scout to trigger a holographic barrier, breaking the line of sight. She signaled the floating cadet to fly in from above at the exact moment to distract the telekinetic cadet. Meanwhile, she and Jace moved in synchronized steps, using timing to guide their opponents into predictable patterns. The 4-armed cadet helped by manipulating floating platforms to trap the fastest alien in a temporary loop. The ambush failed. Lyra's team captured another data core, while the opposing team struggled to regain control. The arena buzzed with whispers. Even instructors seemed impressed, noting her ability to turn the weaknesses of her team into a strategic advantage. Lyra, however, didn't smile or seek recognition. She knew this was only practice. Real challenges would be far more complex. After the exercise, cadets were assigned reflection sessions. Lyra and her teammates discussed what had worked and what hadn't. She emphasized observation, timing, and communication. Her human intuition and calm thinking stood out as a model for others. Slowly, some cadets began to approach her with questions, genuinely seeking advice. For the first time, she realized that she wasn't just surviving, she was beginning to influence the way others trained and thought. That evening, the Academy announced a special training challenge for top-performing cadets. It was an optional test, but the instructors hinted that it could identify future leaders and elite operatives. Lyra considered whether she should participate. Competing in such a high-profile exercise could draw attention, both positive and negative. But she also knew that avoiding challenges would not prove anything. She decided to join. The next day, she entered the preparation room where cadets gathered before the challenge. Here, she noticed the 3 cadets she had defeated in the first exercise. Their eyes narrowed as they saw her. The silver-scaled cadet's smirk had disappeared, replaced by a calculating stare. The blue-skinned 3-armed cadet seemed tense, and the hovering cadet's confidence wavered slightly. They whispered among themselves, clearly planning something. Lyra felt no fear. She understood that their pride would make them predictable. They assumed humans were weak, impulsive, and reactive. She would use that assumption to her advantage. The challenge began.
EM.
Unlike the previous exercises, this one was a mixture of puzzle-solving, strategy, and controlled skill displays. Cadets were placed in teams and given limited resources. The objective was to navigate a complex course, solve environmental puzzles, and secure markers along the way. Success relied not on raw power, but on critical thinking, coordination, and adaptability. Lyra's team moved efficiently. She identified the most challenging obstacles first, delegating tasks based on her teammates' abilities. The floating cadet manipulated overhead platforms to provide bridges. The quadruped scout explored tight corridors to find solutions, and the 4-armed cadet handled simultaneous controls with precision. Lyra's calm, deliberate guidance. As they reached the central area, Lyra noticed her 3 previous challengers trying to cut them off. They approached confidently, assuming they could intimidate her into mistakes. Lyra didn't panic. She observed carefully, waiting for the moment when their coordination faltered. When the first cadet attempted a direct confrontation, Lyra signaled a simple but effective maneuver. The 4-armed cadet moved a platform into position, forcing the rival to pause. The floating cadet created a temporary barrier, breaking their line of sight. Lyra guided the quadruped scout to disable a crucial obstacle in the environment that slowed the rivals. By the time her team moved forward, the 3 challengers had been subtly delayed, not through aggression, but through clever use of the surroundings and timing. Lyra's team reached the central marker first. They completed the puzzle quickly and efficiently, gaining the highest points. Her previous opponents arrived moments later, shocked that the human girl had outperformed them without brute strength or flashy alien abilities. After the exercise, instructors gathered the cadets for evaluation. They praised Lyra's strategy, leadership, and calm adaptability. They highlighted how her approach showed that humans were capable of thinking in ways many aliens overlooked. Lyra listened quietly, content with the acknowledgement, but focused on improvement. Later, in the quiet of her dormitory, Lyra reflected on the day. The academy was proving to be more than a place of combat skill. It was a test of observation, creativity, and patience. She realized that human ingenuity was her greatest strength. While other cadets relied on abilities they could not control fully, she relied on careful observation, adaptability, and coordination. That gave her an edge no amount of alien power could match. Word of her achievements continued to spread. Some cadets approached her for advice, others for friendly collaboration, and a few for secret rivalries. Lyra smiled quietly, realizing that respect, curiosity, and even envy were all signs of progress. She wasn't just surviving here. She was beginning to thrive. That night, as she gazed out at the stars visible through the Academy's dome, she felt a sense of purpose. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and opportunities, and humans were still underestimated. But she knew one thing clearly: human courage, intelligence, and creativity could change expectations. And she, Lyra Kane, intended to prove it every day she trained, every exercise she faced, and every rival she encountered. She had survived the mockery, adapted to alien abilities, and shown that humans were more than capable. Tomorrow, the Academy would offer new tests, new obstacles, and perhaps even harder opponents. But Lyra was ready. She had learned the value of observation, teamwork, and strategy. She had discovered the quiet power of patience and intelligence. And most importantly, she had realized that underestimating a human was a mistake the galaxy would not want to repeat. With that thought, Lyra closed her eyes, resting only for a moment, knowing that the challenges ahead would demand her full focus. The human girl who had once been laughed at was no longer invisible. She had become someone to watch, someone to respect, and perhaps someone to fear, though not in the way her enemies expected. She would not fight with brute force, but with ingenuity, courage, and an indomitable spirit that even the most extraordinary aliens could not ignore. Life at the Interstellar Combat Academy grew more challenging with every passing day. Lyra Kane had become a figure of quiet fascination among her fellow cadets. Some admired her intelligence, adaptability, and calm focus, while others grew frustrated at how a human girl, small, unassuming, and apparently weak, kept outperforming cadets with strength, speed, or exotic abilities far beyond her own. Lyra herself had no time for arrogance or distractions. She spent long hours studying alien tactics, observing patterns, and refining her own approach. While the other cadets often relied on their innate abilities, she relied on precision, timing, and strategy. She had learned early on that predictability was her enemy, and adaptability was her greatest ally. One morning, the Academy announced a new type of training, the Tactical Simulation Gauntlet. Unlike previous exercises, this one would test cadets individually, placing them in a dynamic environment filled with shifting platforms, obstacles, and moving targets. Each cadet had to navigate the course, complete objectives, and avoid penalties. Success required observation, timing, and problem-solving under pressure. Lyra arrived at the gauntlet with a calm determination. She had watched older cadets attempt preliminary runs, seeing how many failed because they rushed, relied too heavily on abilities, or ignored subtle patterns in the environment. She knew her methodical approach could give her an advantage, and she intended to make the most of it. As the simulation began, Lyra moved carefully. The course was intricate, with floating platforms, rotating barriers, and timed doors. Some obstacles required precise coordination, while others demanded quick reflexes. The other cadets charged ahead with force and speed, confident that their powers would carry them through. Almost immediately, several of them stumbled, misjudging timing or overlooking hazards. Lyra observed these mistakes quietly, taking mental notes for herself. Midway through the gauntlet, she encountered a challenge that required simultaneous manipulation of multiple controls. It was designed to be nearly impossible for a single cadet, favoring those with multiple limbs or telekinetic abilities. The four-armed cadets in the class would normally excel here, while Lyra, with only 2 arms, seemed at a disadvantage. She paused, studying the mechanism. Instead of trying to force it with brute strength or reach, she analyzed the sequence of movements. She noticed that the platform would remain stable for a brief moment after each lever was pulled, giving her a tiny window to activate all controls. With careful timing and practice, she executed a series of precise steps, completing the task successfully. The instructors watching her were impressed. One murmured, "Humans always find a way." Lyra didn't hear the comment. She was focused entirely on her next objective, moving with steady determination through the maze-like simulation. After completing the gauntlet, Lyra received her performance score, the highest of her group. Whispers followed her everywhere, some admiring, some incredulous. Among the observers were her 3 previous rivals, the cadets she had outsmarted in earlier exercises. Their expressions were unreadable, but Lyra could sense tension. They respected her skill, but were determined to challenge her again, this time under conditions where she could not rely solely on strategy or observation. Days passed, and Lyra's reputation continued to grow. She spent her free time learning from other cadets, analyzing their combat styles, and finding ways to incorporate elements of alien techniques into her own approach. Her adaptability became her signature. While others depended on innate gifts, she combined observation, intelligence, and creativity to level the playing field. One evening, an unusual message arrived. It was an invitation from a senior instructor, a distinguished alien known for mentoring the Academy's top cadets. The instructor, who had watched Lyra's progress closely, requested her presence in a private training chamber. Lyra entered the chamber cautiously. The instructor's crystalline eyes regarded her thoughtfully. "You have potential," he said in a measured tone, "not because of raw strength or speed or power, but because of your mind. Humans are underestimated, and yet you have adapted remarkably. I would like to train you further, to help you refine your approach and prepare for challenges ahead." Lyra felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Mentorship at this level was rare, especially for a human cadet. She accepted immediately, eager to learn whatever she could. Under the instructor's guidance, Lyra began advanced exercises focused on tactics, environmental manipulation, and prediction. She learned to anticipate multiple cadets' actions simultaneously, to adjust her strategy in real time, and to exploit subtle patterns in behavior. Her training sessions often ended with complex puzzles or simulations that seemed nearly impossible. But each time, she emerged successful, her skill and confidence growing steadily. Meanwhile, her previous rivals were not idle. The 3 cadets who had first mocked her began to observe her closely, seeking weaknesses. They noted her careful, methodical approach and plotted to use speed, power, and teamwork against her in the next exercise. They believed that raw ability, when combined, could overwhelm a human who relied on observation and planning. The next major exercise was announced, a team-based challenge pitting cadets against one another in a series of coordinated objectives. Teams had to capture and transport energy modules through complex terrain while avoiding obstacles and opponents. While Lyra's reputation had grown, she knew that her team could face significant challenges, especially from cadets who underestimated her. Lyra took her position at the start line, assessing her team and their opponents. She noticed subtle tells in the movements of the 3 cadets who had previously mocked her. They were overconfident, relying on their abilities without considering strategy. Lyra smiled slightly. Overconfidence was a weakness she could exploit. The exercise began. Chaos erupted immediately, with teams dashing through the terrain using speed, strength, and abilities to gain advantage. Lyra moved carefully, guiding her team with calm, precise instructions. She directed the quadruped scout to flank opponents, the floating cadet to create distractions, and her teammates to maneuver strategically around obstacles. Her previous challengers approached quickly, attempting to corner her team and secure the modules first. They moved in coordinated strikes, expecting that sheer force would overwhelm the human girl. Lyra observed their rhythm, noticing the small pauses, hesitations, and predictable sequences in their teamwork. At the perfect moment, she initiated a series of maneuvers that exploited those gaps. The floating cadet distracted one opponent while Lyra guided the quadruped scout to retrieve a module unnoticed. She directed her team to use the environment creatively, shifting platforms and barriers to create advantageous positions. By the end of the exercise, Lyra's team had completed the objectives more efficiently than any other group. Her previous challengers were left stunned, unable to understand how a human had outmaneuvered them once again. This time, there was no mockery, only grudging respect. They realized that her approach was not just luck, it was a skill cultivated through observation, patience, and intelligence. After the exercise, the instructors convened to evaluate the results. They praised Lyra's leadership and strategic thinking, highlighting her ability to leverage the strengths of her team while minimizing weaknesses. One instructor noted, "Humans are underestimated, yet they possess adaptability and foresight that can surpass even the most extraordinary abilities." Lyra listened quietly, feeling a sense of pride, but remaining focused on the future. She knew that the Academy would continue to test her in ways she had never imagined. There would be challenges that required not just observation and planning, but also creativity, quick thinking, and courage under pressure. As she returned to her quarters that night, she reflected on the journey so far. She had arrived at the Academy as a human girl who others dismissed, laughed at, and underestimated. She had faced cadets far stronger, faster, and more capable in ways she had never imagined, and yet she had survived, excelled, and begun to earn respect, not through brute force, but through intelligence, adaptability, and careful observation. Lyra realized that this was only the beginning. The challenges ahead would be more complex, the opponents more determined, and the stakes higher. But she felt ready. She had learned to turn perceived weaknesses into strengths, to see opportunities where others saw obstacles, and to remain calm under pressure. These skills would serve her well in the trials to come. In the quiet hours before sleep, she gazed out at the stars visible through the Academy's dome. The galaxy was vast, filled with civilizations, powers, and secrets waiting to be discovered. She understood that being human did not mean being weak. It meant being adaptable, resourceful, and capable of surprising those who underestimated her. Lyra Kane closed her eyes with a sense of determination. The Academy had taught her much, but the lessons were far from over. Her rivals would continue to challenge her, the instructors would push her further, and the galaxy itself would present obstacles that no cadet had yet faced. But she knew one thing with certainty: she would not be defined by the limitations others assumed she had. She would define herself through ingenuity, courage, and an unyielding spirit. And when the next challenge came, the cadets who had laughed at her, the ones who had doubted her, would see once again that humans were not to be underestimated. Lyra smiled faintly, feeling a spark of excitement. The journey was far from over, but she had discovered something invaluable. Being human in a universe of extraordinary beings was not a disadvantage. It was an opportunity to prove that intelligence, patience, and creativity could triumph where raw power often failed. She turned away from the stars, ready to face whatever awaited her in the coming days. The human girl who had once been laughed at was now a cadet to watch, a leader in the making, and a force that the galaxy would learn to respect, not through strength, but through the brilliance of her mind and the resilience of her spirit. The final test at the Interstellar Combat Academy had arrived. Unlike previous exercises, this challenge was designed to simulate a real galactic mission. Teams would navigate a complex environment, secure energy cores, and overcome unpredictable obstacles. Success would require teamwork, strategy, observation, and the ability to adapt in real time. Failure could mean a lost score, public embarrassment, or missed opportunities for advancement. Lyra Kane stood at the start line, observing her surroundings. The arena was vast, a multi-level simulation chamber filled with shifting platforms, holographic hazards, and moving pathways. The other cadets were buzzing with excitement and confidence. Among them were the 3 alien cadets, who had once mocked her, now clearly intent on proving that they were superior. Their expressions were sharp, their movements deliberate, and their eyes followed Lyra with quiet calculation. Her team was ready. The floating cadet hovered in place, wings glowing softly. The quadruped scout shifted on its legs, alert and poised. The 4-armed cadet balanced a series of tools in its hands, prepared to manipulate any obstacles that came their way. Jace, the human cadet, gave her a nod, trusting her leadership. Lyra felt a quiet surge of determination. This was her moment to apply everything she had learned. The signal sounded and the simulation began. Immediately, chaos erupted. Teams dashed forward, using speed, strength, and alien abilities to gain early advantage. Some cadets created energy shields, others teleported or hovered, and a few relied on brute force to push opponents aside. Lyra's approach, however, remained methodical. She assessed each movement, each opportunity, and directed her team with precision. The first obstacle was a series of rotating platforms, spaced unevenly and moving unpredictably. Many cadets misjudged timing and fell, losing precious seconds. Lyra instructed the quadruped scout to move first, its small size and agility allowing it to traverse safely. The floating cadet provided a temporary bridge by holding a platform steady midair. Lyra and Jace moved in tandem, using careful steps to avoid miscalculations. The 4-armed cadet manipulated the remaining platforms, creating a path for all team members to cross efficiently. As they progressed, the 3 alien cadets who had once mocked her attempted to intercept them. They moved with coordinated speed, confident that their superior abilities would overwhelm a human-led team. Lyra observed them carefully, noting predictable patterns in their movement. Overconfidence, she realized, was their weakness. She directed her team to adjust their positions. The quadruped scout darted behind the aliens, drawing attention and forcing them to split focus. The floating cadet created visual distractions, catching the rival's eyes while Lyra maneuvered through a narrow passage. Jace and the 4-armed cadet followed her, synchronized and efficient. By the time the alien cadets realized their mistake, Lyra's team had already secured the first energy core. The next section of the simulation was even more complex. A series of shifting walls, rotating barriers, and timed doors required precise coordination. Many cadets attempted to rush through, relying on speed, but found themselves trapped or delayed. Lyra, however, used careful observation. She noticed subtle patterns in the shifting walls and predicted the timing of each movement. She signaled her team to advance in a staggered formation. The quadruped scout led the way, testing gaps in the walls. The 4-armed cadet manipulated controls to hold doors open briefly. Lyra and Jace followed, moving in perfect synchronization. The floating cadet provided overhead observation, alerting the team to potential hazards. Together, they moved efficiently, avoiding delays and maximizing their progress. The alien cadets pursued aggressively, trying to cut off their path. They underestimated the human girl once more, assuming she would react impulsively under pressure. Lyra, however, remained calm. She anticipated their moves, predicting how they would attempt to block her team. At the perfect moment, she guided the 4-armed cadet to shift a barrier, forcing the rivals into a longer route. She signaled the floating cadet to create a temporary obstruction, and Jace moved quickly to secure the second energy core. By mid-challenge, Lyra's team had captured 2 of the 3 available cores, while most other teams struggled to secure even one. The alien cadets, frustrated and bewildered, began to recognize a pattern. Lyra did not rely on strength or extraordinary abilities. She relied on observation, planning, and precise execution. The final section of the simulation was the most difficult, A complex maze with moving floors, laser grids, and timed gates separated the remaining energy core from the teams. Many cadets attempted to rush through and were immediately delayed, trapped, or forced to backtrack. Lyra approached the challenge differently. She studied the maze, noting patterns in the moving floors and laser grids. She calculated the timing needed to reach the core without unnecessary risks. She directed her team to follow a precise path. The quadruped scout moved first, agile and alert. The floating cadet adjusted platforms to create safe passages. The four-armed cadet manipulated controls to synchronize doors and gates. Lyra and Jace followed with perfect timing. The other cadets, including her previous challengers, struggled to adapt to the dynamic maze. They attempted to force through obstacles, but their speed and power were not enough to compensate for poor planning. Finally, Lyra reached the core. She secured it, signaling her team to regroup. They completed the challenge with efficiency, precision, and teamwork. The alien cadets arrived moments later, unable to catch up. Their frustration was visible, but there was also a new respect in their eyes. They had underestimated a human girl once, and now they understood the cost of that mistake. The instructors observed silently, noting the performance. Lyra's approach demonstrated a mastery that went beyond mere skill. She had applied strategy, adaptability, leadership, and creativity. One instructor whispered to another, "This human shows qualities that few species ever develop." After the simulation ended, cadets returned to the evaluation chamber. Scores were tallied, and Lyra's team was declared the top performers. Her previous challengers were next in ranking, still processing the outcome. The instructors addressed all cadets, praising teamwork, ingenuity, and problem-solving. Lyra received special recognition for her leadership, strategic thinking, and ability to adapt under pressure. As the other cadets congratulated her, Lyra felt a quiet satisfaction. She had not only survived another test, but she had also proven that humans could excel in ways many aliens overlooked. Her approach was different, yes, but effective. Observation, planning, and adaptability had allowed her to turn disadvantages into strengths. Later, in the quiet of her dormitory, Lyra reflected on the journey. She remembered the day she had first arrived, laughed at by towering aliens who assumed she was weak. She remembered the early exercises, where she had relied solely on observation and timing to survive. And now, after weeks of training, mentorship, and practice, she had not only survived but thrived, demonstrating that humans were capable of far more than most beings had believed. Lyra understood that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges, mysteries, and civilizations that underestimated humanity. But she had discovered a powerful truth: human ingenuity, patience, and creativity could rival the abilities of even the most extraordinary species. Her three previous challengers approached her later that evening. The silver-scaled cadet spoke first, his tone cautious. You did well today. We underestimated you." "That was a mistake," Lyra nodded politely. "Thank you. You all are strong, and it's good to learn from each other." The blue-skinned cadet added, "We can see that humans are clever, not just lucky." The hovering cadet, usually full of confidence, simply nodded. There was no arrogance, only respect. Lyra realized that this acknowledgement meant more than victory in any exercise. She had changed perceptions, proving that humans were capable, intelligent, and adaptable. The next morning, instructors gathered all cadets for a special ceremony. Certificates were awarded, rankings announced, and exceptional performances highlighted. Lyra received a commendation for her strategic leadership, adaptability, and teamwork. Her achievements were noted as an example for all cadets, a reminder that assumptions and underestimations could be dangerous. Lyra stood quietly during the ceremony, her thoughts focused not on praise, but on preparation. The academy had taught her much, but there was still more to learn. New exercises, simulations, and challenges awaited. The galaxy itself offered endless opportunities to test skills, adaptability, and intelligence. As she returned to her quarters, Lyra thought about her journey. She had arrived as a human girl laughed at and underestimated. She had faced challenges that required intelligence, observation, and courage. She had outperformed cadets with extraordinary abilities, gained respect, and proven that humans could excel in a universe built for the extraordinary. Looking out at the stars, she smiled. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns, and humanity had much to prove. But she knew that human ingenuity, creativity, and resilience could achieve incredible things. And she, Lyra Kane, was determined to be at the forefront, not through strength, but through intelligence, strategy, and unyielding determination. Her journey at the academy had transformed her. She was no longer the small, underestimated human girl. She was a cadet to watch, a leader in the making, and a symbol of human potential. Those who had laughed at her, doubted her, or dismissed her had learned an important lesson. Humans, though ordinary in appearance, could achieve the extraordinary when they relied on intelligence, courage, and determination. Lyra Kane had arrived at the academy to prove herself, and she had succeeded. The galaxy would never underestimate a human again. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow, new challenges would await, new lessons would unfold, and new opportunities to demonstrate her abilities would appear. But for now, she allowed herself a quiet moment of pride, knowing that the human girl, who had once been laughed at, had become a cadet respected by all, not for power, but for the brilliance of her mind and the strength of her spirit. The academy had tested her, challenged her, and taught her, and Lyra Kane had risen, proving that humans could stand among the stars, not with overwhelming power, but with courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination.